Okay, welcome. This is Bruce Rawles, and I'm speaking with Susan Dugan, and we're talking about A Course in Miracles again, as usual. And the focus of this particular conversation is we decided it would be good to talk about lesson 133 in the workbook of Course in Miracles. I will not value what is valueless. But before we do that, I thought I'd like to just recap a few of the ideas of that were discussed in a recent discussion group. I finally made it to Temecula, California, to the Foundation for A Course in Miracles headquarters, and attended a couple of the sessions there. I never did get to meet Ken in person, but at least I got a chance to meet some of the people that are there, wonderful folks, and attended a couple of wonderful sessions, very, very enlightening. And one of the comments, I'm going to glance up my notes of some of the comments there. Was, the last thing to go is our judgment against ourselves. When we get scared, we go back to our past, and we go to the past because we're afraid of present love. And just a few of the ideas that were tossed around in some of those sessions. And Susan's been to Temecula a number of times and done some wonderful interviews with Ken Wapnick and one with Gloria. I'm hoping you'll do a follow-on. Is that still in the works, or?
You know, when Gloria's ready, I would.
Yeah, oh, yeah, of course, yeah, that may be sometime, yeah.
Definitely
Anyway.
happy too. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounded like it really a lot of you had sent me your notes, and it sounded like they really resonated for you. A lot of what was said there, and I, as I had told you before when we were talking earlier, your notes about the past really seemed very relevant to what was coming up in my curriculum lately. Which means what's happening in your life, what seems to be happening in your life, and what we bring to the, what we look at with our inner teacher. We bring that darkness that we seem to be experiencing in one form or another, the valueless things that we're experiencing that seem very important to that ego-free presence in our mind. And but the past, that idea of that we go to the past and grab something to scare us. And Ken used to talk about the grab bag. The grab bag of guilty pleasures, or guilty treasures and pleasures. I mean, they're horrible things in our viewpoint, but they're actually treasures, and they're actually sort of guilty pleasures because we're not aware that we secretly want them, but we do because they're our defenses. And so it is that idea of being, what you had in your notes about when we are experiencing present love, meaning the real love in our mind, when we've chosen the teacher of, Jesus as our teacher, and are experiencing the deep comfort and release from specialness that brings, right. and the compassion for all, including ourselves, that comes with that, the lack of judgment, then what frequently happens, because there's a part of us that's so afraid, is we go back into our grab bag and we bring something out, and often it's from the past, because it's all tied to these stories that we have about the sad saga of suffering Susan, I'll call it.
Wow, there's a lot of alliteration in there.
But or suffering Succotash. She was the cartoon character that said that.
Right?
Yeah, right, maybe. But so that's what comes in, and so I've been dealing with that recently in the form of sickness, but physical illness, some symptoms, but then also, but I'm very aware that they're also related with my past story. So it's kind of that. I have it going on both the emotional and physical level, all to make the body real and to push that present love away, and that's kind of what we do. So, that's our defense, and while you're going through that, you can still be choosing present love. You can, even though you can recognize that you're just afraid, you can still, and you're not, you've gone through the steps of saying this is not because of really what it looks like, and you're
never upset for the reason we think.
Never upset for the reason we think. While you're doing the compromise approach of doing whatever magic the Course calls, doing what you need, not ignoring your body, but taking seeing whatever practitioner you think is going to help you with this, and doing whatever treatments are recommended, but all the while working really with the healing in your mind, which is really where this is all happening, and you know, recognizing that this was a flight from love, and it's coming from fear, and then really coming to that place of being very compassionate with that part of us, that inner child that's so afraid, and that we all have, you know, that we all have the same inner child. And it's really the decision-making mind, you know, that becomes afraid of its own power, you know, and believes that it can't go back to the scene of the crime of separation, and, you know, runs back to the shelter of the ego, and of course it's valueless shelter. It's really the cause of our suffering. So
yep. There's
that's what I was thinking.
No real protection there at all, is there?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. As you're saying, I was thinking a lot of times you know, when we have those things come up for us, as, you know, reflected back to us from really our unconscious mind, a lot of times we you know, have the thought, it seems, that, oh, well, I didn't consciously make this up, and that gives us, you know, further justifications for victimhood. But if we just can remind ourselves that, you know, under Holy Spirit's or our inner kindness teacher's counsel, that you know, the unconscious mind is really the mechanism by which we've programmed all this stuff in the past, and then what comes back to us, which seems like sabotage for our best laid plans of fixing the dream and making it comfortable in you know, in external terms, which never really is truly comfortable, because there's always that inner conflict, that inner cognitive dissonance, or whatever you want to call it, that between what we truly know we are as one being, one spirit, and these individuated selves that we think we are, and so it just seems like there's always that you know, struggle or conflict on the battlefield of the ego's thought system, that no matter how carefully we try to contrive it, there's always something that seems to come up, whether, like you say, it's a physical or an emotional upset, or you know, relationship, finances, the whole gamut of stuff. You know, the planets falling apart. You know, any of the broad categories or specifics that we might want to delve into. They're all mechanisms by which we can, you know, indulge in the ego's strategy of making the dream real, and perpetuating our identification with that, and keeping ourselves stuck in it. So
Definitely, and I think it's that fear, you know, that what I've recognized in myself is how quickly I go into fear when the bodily symptoms seem to persist, you know, and I feel that's out of control, that I can't control this. This is something that's happening to me, which is what, you know, we're trying to, you know, we're always putting something out there to feel victimized by, and so it's interesting to, you know, it can be a great opportunity to really, to really, you know, in another area, look at how fearful we are. And one thing that I was conscious of through this experience is that the fear, again, seems out of, I mean, the symptoms are frightening in themselves because your body, but I'm more fearful than I would have been, say, you know, 20 years ago or 10 years ago if I were having the same experience, before I really kind of know as much as I do, because we've got this part of us that's, you know, stirred up by the Course and wants to push it away.
right.
And so you know, the ego's really defending itself. And the Course tells us the ego becomes retaliative. I mean, and we're the ego. We don't, you know, but we experience it as, you know, this is that primal kind of fear that comes up for us. Like, we need to protect ourselves. We must not go back to the mind. That's
right.
the vow that we took, you know. And so it in a way, it seems out of proportion to what's really happening in some ways, you know. And it's hard for us to remain at peace, because the ego's just saying, you know, no, pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. This is important. And what we're really trying to preserve is me. You know, this idea, this false personal self that we've made up, that we think is our safety, and of course it's really nothing. But,
no safety, no peace, no solace. As you're saying that, I was thinking, you know, one of the metaphors I've really found helpful in the last year or two is this, you know, the Holy Spirit wants to, you know, our inner kindness teacher wants to drain the swamp of ego's desolation, and to just let us look at it and see that there's nothing there. It's just a vast empty desert. It's not, as Ken like to say, is not evil, wicked, sinful, or whatever. It's just silly. And
Right.
but it's only when we look at it with that, metaphoric, teacher in hand, that we can afford to laugh, and we can afford to see that it's just laughable. And another metaphor that kind of fits, I think, would be the dashboard indicators, the idiot lights, as sometimes they're called. And we go around in life mostly in a mindless state with masking tape over all those warning indicators. And it's like when we really start looking mindfully at the ego strategy and how often we indulge in judgments and self-condemnation, and often in the form of projecting out as, oh, other people are doing these things that are really horrific and, heinous and whatever. But when we really, look carefully and peel that masking tape off the dashboard, it's like, holy crap, those have been going on all this time, but we think it's like this sudden thing. Now it's a big deal. So.
Right. It kind of worked for us when it was in concealment.
Right.
I mean, it ultimately worked for us, or we wouldn't come to force, But it, yeah, we had a lid on it, and
ego got mileage out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, of course, we're still getting mileage out of it when we choose. That's at least we think we are, but part of us doesn't believe that anymore, and so that
right.
Discordance between us knowing too much now with the course, and then when we've chosen against ourselves, what we really want, is very painful. And yeah, so I think that's I mean, I think that it's no coincidence that the more, for me, in my experience, that the more we withdraw, we're willing to let go of our projections on others, and really work with forgiveness. And I mean, that's really been my prayer for many years, is to learn true forgiveness and to really withdraw the judgments that, that internal critic that I have within in my special relationships, and ultimately in all my relationships. And I've been able to do a lot of that with help, with lots and lots of help and tons of practice. But as that has, I'm beginning to see, real compassion in those relationships instead of this automatic judgment. Or I've been able to return to peace really quickly, much more quickly. But what I'm finding is there's so much more that we turn on ourselves, and I think the sickness is part of that scenario. So in a way, we can't really move. We can't skip steps, as Ken used to say. We can't move faster than our fear will allow. And sometimes we just, when we find ourselves in, whether it's an emotional hissy fit or, having physical symptoms or whatever it is, where that inner child is screaming, "What about me?" And we just have to, even though we know that that's not ultimately the answer, I think we have to kind of be really compassionate with that part of ourselves and sit down with it and treat it with listen to it, not just tamp it down again, but pay attention, give it the attention that it wants, hear what it has to say, and like you would a frightened child. And then you can, because you can't really reason with that part of that immature part of yourself that you still, some part of you must be invested in, or you wouldn't be experiencing it,
Mm-hmm.
So the not fighting ourself that the Course talks about comes out in practice. I think it can come out in those ways in our practice, and it's that gentleness that Ken always was so wonderful at emphasizing. Yes, we can get to ultimately we shouldn't take it seriously, but we can't get to the not taking it seriously until we bring in the gentleness.
Right.
I think, I can't.
Exactly. And it's looking with gentleness, looking with compassion and tolerance and kindness, and saying, oh, we're all just frightened kids. We've all made this incredibly believable dream. Yes. And we've taken it seriously. How silly how crazy, totally nuts, so off the scale is that?
Right, and it's crazy when the result of that, when we come back to our right mind, we see that it's crazy, but we can't rush that process, I don't think.
Right.
We have to, just allow. I mean, it's not done by us, so we're inviting that presence in, and I found a tickle feather. I'm going to grab it right now that Ken used to give out. Oh, I guess I don't know. What did I do with it? Oh, here it is. Excuse me.
Sure.
But, oh, well, maybe it's not. But anyway, Ken used to give us, I don't know what I did with it,
Okay.
It's around
Well,
here somewhere. But
we
he,
we,
but he used to,
we
he
get
used
the
to
idea.
you can imagine, he used to give out feathers
Uh-huh.
um, to people. He had a big bag of them, and for I don't know how many years he had that. Just, but I received one from him a couple years ago, and it was just that reminder to not take the process so seriously, you know. And I just found it, it had been in the bottom of a purse or something, you know, that I had changed out, and so I found it the other day, and it was a very nice reminder, of course, but you know, that, I mean, that is true, and he would always say, don't try not to take it seriously. But you
Hmm.
know, again, I think we have to, you know, we have to go at our own pace, as
Sure,
that the
sure.
pace that our fear will allow.
Exactly, exactly. So,
Yeah,
so was that the undo grab bag with feathers?
yeah, maybe that was the
Instead of
that's
reaching for the
yeah,
ego's reinforcement bag, let's
right,
you know,
right. Well, I
not
mean,
like you said, not undue levity, you know, not forced levity, because that obviously backfires. But
that's
but
not going to help. Yeah,
but when we can peacefully, um,
absolutely.
you know, step back with it, you know, above the battleground in our mind of
Right,
what's going on in our lives. That's, I think, what gives us that perspective that we can then
right.
afford to just be. And when you had the image of the little kid, I was picturing a patient parent with a gentle smile, you know, with the kid with coming out with arms swinging, you know, and when the longer arm of the parent just holding gently the head of the child. Go ahead and
Right.
swing all you want, but you're not reaching
Right.
me, kind of thing. And that kind of reminds me of the one of his audios where he talks about the arch of forgiveness and
Mm-hmm.
you know, essentially having that inner loving parent that is not affected by the childhood, but is willing to listen and watch and
Right.
acknowledge. And I think that's what spoke to what you were saying, spoke to that for me. Yeah.
Yes, and remain compassionate. It's just the way Jesus treats us in the Course,
Right.
you know, where he recognizes that we're having a nightmare, but he is totally compassionate with us. You know,
Yeah.
he's not trying to shake us awake. He's not. He sits with us. You know, if we need to. Yeah, I mean, if we need an arm around us, then he'll put an arm around us. You know, I mean, as long as we invite him, we have to invite him, and so it's that you know, the result of this and what spontaneously happens through the practice of inviting that and just recognizing that the cause is not in whatever seems to be happening, that what spontaneously happens through the practice at the end of it when we become right-minded is that we don't take it seriously. We're back in his viewpoint. And but you know, while we're in that, and you and I have talked so much in these chats on resistance, but while we're in that state where it does seem still real, and yet we still have asked for help, and we know it's that somewhere it's there, you know, then it's helpful to just you know, imagine him beside us and wait for that, and imagine comforting that child ourselves. You know, I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
so. And I think
Yes.
it passes more quickly. It passes more quickly that way instead
It
of
does.
trying
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
to.
Feeling, you know, in whatever metaphor or visualization is helpful, you know, that comfort and that integrity and that you know, willingness to patiently watch what seems to be happening and
Right,
not take it quite so seriously.
right.
Which kind of ties into earlier this morning. I was listening to podcast number 50 of Gary Renard and Jean Bogart. I only got about 40 minutes through it, but one of the things they started out with I thought was really appropriate was, you know, it's not so serious, and
Right.
I think it's that perspective that helps us, you know, step back and really look objectively and mindfully at what, you know, the elements of our seeming you know, big deal
Right.
real world as we normally think of it, uh, you know, seems to be, and not take it not only so seriously, but make it wrapped up with our identity and I was starting to do that yesterday evening. My wife and I went out with our next door neighbors and one of my wife's coworkers to dinner yesterday evening, and we got into a, you know, lengthy political discussion. And for the
Oh boy.
most part, I was just kind of having fun watching it. And then there was a subject that I realized just for a moment toward the end of the discussion that I was invested in, and it's like, oh, interesting, and I felt myself, kind of getting a little tense, and it
Yeah,
was like interesting just to watch that, and then within a few seconds or a couple minutes or whatever it was, anyway, I realized, oh, I'm making a big deal out of this, and like you say, the recognition, the time between,
right,
noticing when you're invested in something, and then letting yourself let go of that investment, and just saying whatever you need to say. I don't think I said anything different than I would have said otherwise about this particular topic, but I just recognized that it didn't have to be a big deal for me, and that if I was going to make it a big deal, then that would become something that would push us apart, the people around
right,
the dinner table, rather than, something that was a shared interest, and it was like kind of a little aha moment for me. So anyway.
right. Well, I think the beauty of making forgiveness the purpose of your days,
Hmm.
looking at your life as a classroom, is that it does, I mean, it's not that, again, we don't actually let go of the guilt, but it will start to, it does start to generalize, and it becomes, like we have these times where we don't really have to go through the mechanical, I'm not upset for the reason I think I could, please help me to, it becomes less and less mechanical feeling. There's this automatic recognition that
Right.
that's not the cause, and often it will just drop away at that point. But
Yeah.
but again, it depends how fearful of love we are at any given moment.
Yeah, it's true. We don't have to have a 27-point checklist,
Right.
because I've actually simplified it down to a 4-point checklist today. So, well, I'm sort of kidding, but sort of not. But I thought this would be a good segue into reading lesson 133,
Okay.
do you want to just read the first paragraph of I will not value what is valueless? I think
Do you want to read the whole lesson, or were you just
I
talking?
think the whole lesson actually has a lot of good stuff in it, or at least down to well, pretty much the whole lesson. Yeah, I think we have time for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it begins, sometimes in teaching there is benefit, particularly after you have gone through what seems theoretical and far from what the student has already learned, to bring him back to practical concerns. So this is Jesus talking. This we will do today. We will not speak of lofty world-encompassing ideas, but dwell instead on benefits to you. So he's becoming a salesman. Here are the benefits. Okay. I know the
Uh-huh.
theory doesn't interest you that much, but it actually will have some practical application.
Exactly. Or as Ken would say, I think at times, is he doesn't, he's not afraid of stooping to appealing to our selfish interest, or however he used to put that. It's like,
Right.
we think that the theory is just, who needs that, but I want something that benefits me. Well, of course, the true self is benefits everyone, and that's where the shared interests come in.
Right.
Then it continues, you do not ask too much of life, but far too little. When you let your mind be drawn to bodily concerns, to things you buy, to eminences valued by the world, you ask for sorrow, not for happiness. This course does not attempt to take from you the little that you have. It's one of my favorite reminders. It kind of ties into the Song of Prayer favorite line of, the secret of true prayer is to forget the things you think you need. It
Mm.
says, it does not try to substitute utopian ideas for satisfactions which the world contains. There are no satisfactions in the world. That's kind of a
Right.
nice aha, isn't it? When we realize that, in truth, anything that's ephemeral, that fleeting, comes and goes, whether it's a palatial estate that has amassed over a lifetime of arduous work or inheritance, or doesn't matter. I mean, or even if we were to own a galaxy, it's like, well, there's all these other galaxies. It's like it's never enough for the ego.
No, and I mean we made it all up.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
and since the only thing that can really satisfy us is the truth of our own nature, then something made up that's completely in opposition to that truth. I mean, it's just a complete setup for suffering,
right,
right? Everything here.
right.
So,
Which does,
and that's why God doesn't know about the world, which is a
right.
good.
That is so helpful, and yet so challenging, I think, for a lot of course students when they first get into it, and those of us who conveniently kind of blacked that whole idea out the first time through, and then came back to it years later and realized, oh, that's the only way it could possibly work.
Right.
Because if perfect oneness had any involvement, even dip the toe into the pool of duality, then we'd be goners, because then it would be acknowledging the dream and making the dream real, which is the very thing that the Course urges us to gently undo.
Right, and it would be making the ego's thought system of one or the other, and the idea of murder, that which is really at the root of all this, that we replaced God, we destroyed God, real. I mean, to me, that idea that God didn't know about this world was what the big sigh of relief that I had when I came to the Course, because I didn't, all my life, I couldn't understand how, that's why I didn't believe in God, was because how could that be? Why would God have created a world like this, and a biblical story like the biblical stories that we hear in both the Old and New Testament, that are so violent and so all about exclusiveness, and I didn't get it. I couldn't reconcile it.
Very schizophrenic too.
So I think that is deeply comforting for a lot of people. But yes, it can be very challenging if you think that God is protecting you, the God of the Bible is protecting you, then that can be really scary.
Yeah, which I suppose is just a macrocosm for the fact that, to the ego, the fact that God has nothing to do with the world is the ultimate, well, other than our mind's decision to choose that, the ultimate threat.
Yes.
But the to what we really are, and our Holy Spirit's kindness, teachers, guidance, whatever we want to metaphor we use, that is completely 100% comforting.
Oh, absolutely. To that inner child again, that's longing. That lesson 182 talks about, it's just longing to go home. To welcome back into its parents' arms, and so believing that will never happen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we think we threw away the key to heaven, and yet it's always right in our mind where we left it.
Exactly. So is it my turn?
Oh, sure, go for it. Yeah.
So is it paragraph 3 that we're on?
I think so.
So today we list the real criteria by which to test all things you think you want. Unless they meet these sound requirements, they are not worth desiring at all, for they can but replace what offers more. The laws that govern choice you cannot make, no more than you can make alternatives from which to choose. The choosing you can do, indeed you must, but it is wise to learn the laws you set in motion when you choose, and what alternatives you choose between. So he's giving us the idea, the idea that we're the decision-making mind, and that's really the whole point of the Course. Is not. Somebody in my class that I have in Denver the other night was asking about what is the Course, who is new to the Course and was new to my class, was asking about what is the Course, where are what is the Course's take on on awakening, what it's like to be awake. And I was like, the Course doesn't really talk about what it's like to be awake, because its whole focus is really to get us back. It's to meet us in the dream. I mean, that's why there's so much dualistic language, and then to show us that there's a way out of this dream. There's a ladder up back to the mind, that out of this dream, and to have us begin to recognize that we have a decision in any moment about which teacher we can choose. That will awaken us. But awake people don't need the Course.
Right.
Awake people don't come here.
I like how Ken says, nice people don't come here, and then the other comment that comes to mind is the one where he says, as long as when you slog to the bathroom mirror in the morning and identify with the reflection, you've still got some undoing work to do, basically.
Right. Yeah. So we're still going to see the reflection in the real world, but yes, it's the identification with that it's important, that I have to protect it, that it's something real, that bears importance. So. Yep. And it's different from others, that we're different. That's what we want to preserve.
Right. As long as illusions are different, then the ego's maintained, and it can kind of breathe a little sigh of relief. It's like, oh, we've
Right.
you know, the
There's a
sabotage is working. Yeah.
right, the idea that there's a hierarchy of illusion, the
Right.
truth is different for different people. That's the first law of chaos. So
Right.
yes. So go ahead.
Oh, one other thought. It kind of reminded me of when I got to Temecula. I saw the chart on the wall with the classic one of the two thought systems, and I
Yes,
didn't realize that they'd taken the blue dot out of the vault, and it was right there on the chart, this big spherical dot. So anyway,
the ping pong ball.
yeah.
Uh,
Is that what it is?
it
Okay.
is.
Anyway, I was on all the videos. I just kind of figured it was this two-dimensional thing, but it was three-dimensional. I was impressed.
Yes, and actually, I may have told you this before, but one time when I was there, Ken threw it at somebody in the
Oh, really?
audience.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's
So,
good.
I mean, a lot of people, we all ask, questions that we should know better, and
So is it held on with Velcro? Is that?
yeah, I think so, and so yeah, it was just so startling, and it just kind of, it was a very playful Ken move, but it just kind of stopped the ego, in all of us. It was perfect. So yeah, it moves around.
That decision-making mind that terrifies the ego.
Right.
Yep.
It certainly moves around. I mean, it's still with us in the dream. We just don't know it.
Right. Right.
But,
Let's see. Paragraph 4. I think that's where we're at. We have already stressed that there are but two, however many there appear to be. Yep, two choices, two teachers. Huh? The range is set, and this we cannot change. It would be most ungenerous to you to let alternatives be limited or be limitless, and thus delay your final choice until you had considered all of them in time, and not been brought so clearly to the place where there is but one choice that must be made. And there's that, the first miracle principle again. There's no order of difficulties, and there's no difference between illusions, but boy, we sure like to make them different, don't we?
right, and we each have our grab bag or our Pandora's box of what that hierarchy personally seems to be,
Mm-hmm.
and so what most frightens me, what I'm most unwilling to let go of would be different from yours, but
Mm-hmm.
it's content, it's the same. It's
Right.
guilt that we're trying to hold on to, that proves that this is real.
Right.
Because guilt preserves the idea that we really did separate from God, and there's something real to protect, and we're constantly looking for a scapegoat to try to find to prove I exist, but it's not my fault. It's somebody else's. But I love that the very first, we have already stressed there are but two choices. We have only two teachers and two choices at any given moment.
Yep.
The ego or the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and one will root me. If I choose the ego, it will root me more deeply in the dream and leave me, plunge me more deeply into the dream, and the other one will help me take another step toward awakening. And that's the course. That's the process.
Yeah, and at the focus point of that blue dot choosing between those two thought systems is sort of this wonderful, perfect geometric metaphor of the apex of the pyramid or the fulcrum. And one of the Greek philosophers says, give me a fulcrum and I can move the world, in the right place, and well, the right place is in the mind. where else would it be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that decision in the mind, it's going back to that decision-making awareness that
Right.
maker, as Ken in the course mentions it a couple. I don't know, not very much, but Ken did emphasize it, and that's really the that's the Son of God post separation, who believes he chose for the ego and has forgotten that he has a mind.
Mm-hmm. As you're saying that, I was thinking the whole course, it is really speaking to that decision-making point, that focal point, the blue dot, the fulcrum, whatever you want to call it, that point in our awareness that knows that there are really only two choices. And it's kind of like telling a fish about water, because the entire substance of the course really is just showing the contrast between the ego's thought system and its desolation and sabotage and ineffectiveness, and
Right.
the Holy Spirit's thought system, which is completely 100% sane by contrast, and how never the twain shall meet, and yet we constantly are choosing between those two, and ultimately we need to just let go of the one that is totally dysfunctional and 100% insane.
Well, and again, that's why there's such an emphasis in the course about, how am I feeling right now? Pay attention to how I'm feeling. That will tell me which teacher I've chosen. And the more we experience this, the more contrast we're going to experience between the choices. As we were talking earlier, the pain of choosing the ego is going to be more pronounced because it was kind of working for us when we were when it was completely in concealment and we were still able to project. I mean, it gave us some temporary relief anyway. Whereas it begins to not do that, and we have a real contrast too of we do experience glimpses, holy instance of being, of the silliness of it all, and that compassion for all that Jesus has, and when we begin to contrast those two, the choice becomes very clear, and yet that fear that resistance will come up because And what I like what you were saying is that the whole point of the Course is Jesus is addressing us as the decision maker. He's not the you that, he's speaking to Helen, but Helen represents all of us. Helen and Bill represent all of us. So the you he is addressing in the Course, we think is this person, this individual self. And they thought originally it was that individual self, but it's not the person reading this book, it's the decision-making mind. And Ken would always say that that you've made some progress with the Course when you at least begin to, that awareness cannot be intellectually grasped. That has to be grasped through experience, where it just is sort of a little aha that you have somewhere along the way with this practice. That doesn't mean that you're at the top of the ladder, but it means that you're beginning to understand at least and allow the idea that this is not about me.
Well, probably more accurately, it's like the instant you recognize the Course is talking to the decision-making mind that we all have, it's like, I've found the ladder. Now I can start doing something
now we're
with
at
that ladder.
Yes. Because
otherwise, we're clueless if we think it's talking about this personal self. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But that's a process. Again, it's not we're learning. And we're unlearning. We have a teacher that comes with a built-in teacher, and we can't do this by ourselves. That we have to constantly remind ourselves that we have a teacher, and really try to cultivate. I think however everybody's different in how they do that, but in whatever way we can, a relation until we know we are that the same as that inner teacher. We have to cultivate a relationship with it. There has to be a symbol outside the dream that we relate to on a regular basis that can help us become right-minded again.
Yep.
So, yeah. Where are we?
Let's see. We finished number 4?
I think so.
Okay. Number 5 then?
Did you read 4? Am I 5?
Let's see. 1. That doesn't matter.
I don't care.
Okay.
Next one if you want.
Okay.
So 5, you want me to read it?
Sure, go for it. Yeah.
Another kindly and related law is that there is no compromise in what your choice must bring. It cannot give you just a little, for there is no in-between. Each choice you make brings everything to you or nothing. So heaven or hell, right? Therefore, if you learn the tests by which you can distinguish everything from nothing, you will make the better choice. So
that's pretty potent.
Yeah.
I just underlined that third sentence. Everything or nothing. How can it be otherwise? How can it be otherwise? Because the thought system of total inclusion includes everything and everyone, and the ego is, shall we say, lacking thought system, leaves everyone and everything in reality out, including the self that we think we are. So we always feel deprived and
right. In any given moment, between miracles or murder. Miracles meaning that the change of mind, the change of teacher, or the thought of murder, and meaning the belief in separation, the belief that we could push God's love away, destroy love.
Right.
That's why it's referred to as murder. I mean, Jesus tries to get our attention pretty graphically.
Oh yeah, not a lot of minced words there.
You miss those where people are like, where does it say that? And it's like all over the place, But it takes
that's usually when we're either nodding asleep, reading and conveniently glossing over those inconvenient truths, or where we run, scared from the room or whatever, and throw the book against the wall or whatever. But usually, those are the places where we, say, yeah, right, sure, kind of Well, that reminds me of there was a joke I saw on Facebook, I think, a while ago. It was the English teacher was talking about double negatives and how there's countless different variations of double negatives, and and in a whole bunch of different languages, and have the chalkboard filled up with all these double negatives, and and the teacher says, and yet I challenge you to find, and he said, well, or she said that was, the double negatives make a positive, and and the teacher said, well, but I challenge you to find one double positive that makes a negative, and a voice from the back of the room says, yeah, right. Anyway, I thought that was pretty good. So a little aside there.
Okay.
So,
yeah, there are a lot of double negatives in the Course too.
There's quite a few.
But we denied the denial of truth, right? So.
Right. But the double negatives are actually the heart of what the Course is, isn't it? Because, like Ken says, it's a course in not know. It's it's a course.
Negative course.
Yeah. It's not like you're addressing earlier in this recording. It's not about love and awareness and enlightenment and being awake, because we're clueless as to what that really is until we get all the chaff out of the way and undo all the barricades and roadblocks and all the enormous resistance that we've heaped in mountainous amounts. Is that a word, mountainous? To prevent us from being even aware that exists.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the next section, the reason I thought that I just kind of stumbled across this lesson again the other day, and the reason I thought this might be useful is it kind of ties into the things, that an acronym that occurred to me when I was actually going through Journey Through the Workbook and reading this workbook lesson, and it's kind of in reverse order. It makes an acronym of G.I.S.T or G.I.S.T, and so this first letter, well, actually the last letter for time, is addressed in this next paragraph, number 6 of lesson 133 here. But there's actually 4 different things that I think are a pretty good mnemonic for things to just pique our attention and be little light bulb moments when we get ourselves wrapped up in any of these things. GIST is an acronym for guilt, individuality, space, and time. If that works for you, I find it really helpful. And whenever I feel guilty about anything, that's kind of like the inner shield of oblivion. And then the outer 3 really are, or the outer shield of oblivion, or the other 3 acronyms are individuality, if it's anything having to do with specialness, or dividing myself from everyone else or everything else. And then another broad general category is space, anything that distances, whether it's literal or figurative, but in our minds, and anything that divides in time. So this first one goes, first, if you choose a thing that will not last forever, what you chose is valueless. A temporary value is without all value. Time can never take away a value that is real. What fades and dies was never there, and makes no offering to him who chooses it. He is deceived by nothing in a form he thinks he likes. Ah, the ephemera of our lives. Not to say that we shouldn't enjoy them, but just to just kind of watch the things that come and go and say, okay, that's part of the dream I made up, and I can forgive any attachments and aversions to things happening in that dimension of time. Huh?
Right, exactly. I mean, that really covers it. It doesn't, I mean, everything here is the opposite of eternity, of our reality, and eternity, that seamless union, undifferentiated union, that's our true nature with God, where there's no place where the Father leaves off and the Son begins as something separate from himself. So anything here is not eternal, and everything here, time was imagined by the ego thought system in which to play out this dream of separation and fragmentation, and yeah, I mean, if it lives and breathes, and if it passes, which everything does here, this too shall pass is something that has been sort of passed around that story spiritually in a lot of different teachings, but that is not, if it passes, it means it's part of the dream, and and it's ultimately not it's valueless. It's not what we want. It's not going to help us or bring us home. And so pursuing, it's fine to enjoy those things, but making those a pursuit is plunging us more deeply in the dream. We're going in the wrong direction. It's never going to fill the lack that we feel within. And it's never going to help us feel more loved and loving, which is, I think, what brings most people to the Course in the first place, is that inner sense that we're not. That guilty awareness that we're not.
Yeah.
So,
yep. Yeah, because if it's like, that all important E word, eternal, we, in our heart of hearts, we know that we're drawn to that, which is, I think, what pulls us into, studying metaphysics and the Course in particular in the first place, because we know that there's something to that, and yet we can't really define it or describe it because it's really beyond anything that we're familiar with here. But on some level, we know that there's that quality of peace and that quality of unchangeableness that is so deeply profound that how could we not be drawn to that? And we procrastinate over however many seeming lifetimes, but it's still just waiting for our acceptance and getting the obstacles out of the way, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's that stability that appeals to us, that defenselessness. It's really, we know it's everything we want.
Right.
But there again, there's all this unconscious fear, this unconscious vow we made to the ego that we would never go back to the scene of the crime. And so, it's going to take us a while to become completely certain, and we become certain through practice in each moment. And choosing in each moment, is this something that I want? Is this going to take me toward my goal of peace in the mind and awakening, or is it going to plunge me more deeply in this dream of separation and specialness and one or the other? So that's something we can all do. That's really easy. That's really our only part.
It's true.
Our contribution is not the analysis.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Our contribution is not the analysis. I mean,
right.
We don't really understand this, and just do what it's saying.
Yeah. And the only thing we have to really be responsible for is choosing that guidance, our kindness teacher, in the now moment.
Right, and the letting go is done for us, and then we wait. Then we wait for the peace to return. I mean, that's all. Stop. Yeah, the stopping is hard. We want to second guess it and fix it and run back up for Jesus, and that doesn't ever work out well.
So the time dimension, obviously, patience pulls the rug out from underneath the ego's use of time, and we get both an immediate benefit, which is the reconnection to that guidance and that identity, and also then it just, as we forgive those judgments and those misinterpretations, we're just that much closer to the final step that the Course describes that is taken for us.
I mean, if we have asked if we have asked for healing, we have admitted that we're not upset for the reason we think, then the healing is on its way, and our job is just to await it and allow our fear to subside and be compassionate with ourselves, which is harder than it sounds.
You mean getting ourselves out of the way and remembering that our understanding is not a powerful contribution to the truth? That kind of stuff?
It's very tricky. For some people. I don't know. I've heard that.
Rumor has it.
Right, rumor has it.
You want to read the next one?
Sure.
Okay.
We're at 7, right?
Yeah.
Next, if you choose to take a thing away from someone else, you will have nothing left. This is because when you deny his right to everything, you have denied your own. You therefore will not recognize the things you really have, denying that they are there. Who seeks to take away has been deceived by the illusion loss can offer gain, that loss must offer loss and nothing more. Which gets to that whole idea of lack and one or the other, and there's no the loss of heaven is not going to, anything here we try to replace it with or substitute is not going to bring us anything, right?
Exactly.
More loss.
And to work with this acronym that I've been working with the G.I.S.T, this would be the S for space, because if as long as there's something outside, separate from us in our minds, in our imagination only, then we're using space as, an ego tactic or strategy for its purpose of sabotaging our peace, and it takes myriad forms, but it's all about, there's some other, I'm able to distance myself, and the whole concept of projection and that whole gamut of stuff comes into play. But so it seems like that's another good indicator that in the outer shield of oblivion, that's one of ego's linchpin pillars, or whatever you want to call it, that it is crucially important to maintaining the smoke screen of the dream. Is as long as there's space, as long as, that's where I think that's why the physicists in Copenhagen a few decades ago, when they got together and were talking about the implications of quantum physics, were so freaked out, that it's like, well, if all this stuff implies really that space and time are fabrications of the mind and subject to the mind, and and that means mind is primary, then space is well, we're back into the projection room, and instead of glued to the screen, and that, as egos, we can't have that. Now, can we?
Right, and I mean, as you know, even the realm of physics is still looked at as though there's a brain, that is mind, and so that's different from what the Course is talking about. And so even the most brilliant physicist, if that's the only, it can't really wrap their mind around it either, because it's not in it's not in the brain, it's not outside the mind that the Course is talking about, which is outside what we believe is reality. So the universe, outside the universe.
Yep. Yeah, and that if we in truth are outside space and time, then that's pretty darn threatening to the ego, because it basically says that the whole dream identity that we've so become enamored with that is bogus. It's just a fraud. It's a fake. And
what does that mean for me? I mean, we it goes right back to that, what we were saying at the beginning with that inner child. Like, pay attention to me. What is that? If I keep practicing this Course, this is what when we're listening to the ego, what the kinds of self-talk that will come up. It comes up for me. I mean, it's not so clear to me immediately that that's what it is, but I always come to realize that that's what's going on. Is what about me? There's this personal self that I believe I am that is screaming, I can't go there. I don't want to disappear, because we don't what is outside the mind? We've had glimpses of that through this practice, and even elongated maybe weeks and seeming times within the dream in which we are experiencing our lives in a very right-minded sense with Jesus, very, very connected with our inner teacher, and very compassionate toward all, and maybe not excluding, and able to let go of guilt like that. But then what ultimately, that's frightening. What I still don't know what that means ultimately at the end of the seeming journey, at the top of the seeming ladder, and boy, that's very, very threatening to us.
Yeah.
You have to, Ken always said, have a healthy respect for it. Have a healthy respect for your own fear and process.
Right.
Don't wallow in it and don't indulge it, but there's a part of you. It's going to take time. You can't skip.
And that's part of patience.
That's part of the patience. Yes.
Yeah, and being willing to forgive yourself for judging yourself and being
kind to where you're at. In the last academy, one of the teachers said that particular line, and I think that's a great line. Just be kind to where you're at. As someone earnestly practicing this, and forgive yourself that when this resistance comes up, because it's bound to. Ken would say, if it's not coming up, if you're not seeing some of this, you're not paying attention. Again, we're spacing out the sections that say what is, that it's either miracles or murder. You
mean overly sedated in some capacity or another?
Right. That's resistance instance too. You know, we get this dreamy look on our faces, and we completely, you know, yeah, or fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, people listening, oh my goodness, in classes and stuff, you know, we fall asleep. We're reading it together, and it's like, oh, I think I'm going to check out for that part, you know. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay.
And speaking of reading,
Yeah, we
there's
should
the
actually
next
we could
the
go on
next.
for hours if we don't like it.
Oh, well, I just thought this would be kind of nice to wrap up the last little bit of this
Oh, I know.
this acronym, because then I think the next three paragraphs actually tie into the individuality part of the acronym pretty nicely. 8, 9, and 10. You want to just read those three?
You want me to do 8?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go ahead and read 8, and I'll read 9.
The next consideration is the one on which the others rest. Why is the choice you make of value to you? What attracts your mind to it? What purpose does it serve? Here it is easiest of all to be deceived, for what the ego wants, it fails to recognize. It does not even tell the truth as it perceives it, for it needs to keep the halo which it uses to protect its goals from tarnish and from rust, that you may see how innocent it is. So there's the face of innocence the Course talks about, right? Yeah. The spiritual ego. Yeah. That's good. What purpose does it serve? That's what we were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the big why. Yet is its camouflage a thin veneer which could deceive but those who are content to be deceived. More drugs. Need more sedation. Its goals are obvious to anyone who cares to look for them. Here is deception doubled, for the one who is deceived will not perceive that he has merely failed to gain. He will believe that he has served the ego's hidden goals. You want to read 10?
Yep.
Okay.
Yet though he tries to keep its halo clear within his vision, still must he perceive its tarnished edges and its rusted core. His ineffectual mistakes appear as sins to him, because he looks upon the tarnish as his own, the rust a sign of deep unworthiness within himself. He who would still preserve the ego's goals and serve them as his own makes no mistakes according to the dictates of his guide. The guidance teaches it is error to believe that sins are but mistakes. For who would suffer for his sins if this were so? So it's always about making the idea of sin, guilt, and fear, the ego's thought system, real. You know, we really did separate from God. We really deserve punishment in the future, which is causing or in the present, that's the present cause of our guilt, and we deserve punishment in the future from an avenging God, which we made in the ego's image.
Yep, and that's the core of the ego's individuality,
right.
is this belief in separation that has that unholy trinity as its chief characteristics.
Exactly.
Yep. Which leads to the last one, which is the G for guilt in the acronym here. And so we come to the criterion for choice that is the hardest to believe because its obviousness is overlaid with many levels of obscurity. If you feel any guilt about your choice, it says any, not some, any guilt about your choice, you have allowed the ego's goals to come between the real alternatives. And thus you do not realize there are but two. And the alternative you think you chose seems fearful and too dangerous to be the nothingness it actually is. And there's, to me, a stark contrast. The real alternative is one of my favorite sections in the last chapter of the text. And the real alternative really is looking with our inner kindness teacher, seeing that guilt isn't real, seeing that the outer shield of individuality, space, and time, and all of its forms is a dream. It's a hologram of immense complexity and proportion, and the inner shield of oblivion, being the guilt and the sin, guilt, fear, buddies of the unholy trinity, of that yucky identity that we want to get rid of, but can never achieve because the ego never achieves anything it sets out to do other than can perpetuate the guilt. And there it is. Those are the two alternatives, but it's nothing. Both of them are nothing. Both outer and inner shields of oblivion are nothing, which is where the real peace comes in.
Well, and I love that if you feel any guilt about your choice, again, it's, you know, anything that any problem that we're making real at any given moment and experiencing ourselves victimized by.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we may not necessarily experience the emotion as guilt, but we will experience it as conflict. We will experience it as some kind of negative emotion.
Exactly.
And that anxiety, depression, you know, fear.
The whole laundry list, yeah.
Yeah, whatever, frustration, you know, all of it. And so any twinge of annoyance, any kind of negative reaction. I mean, this is a course in watching our reactions and paying close attention to how we're feeling. That's our clue that we have a choice, that we've chosen the ego as our teacher, and the alternative is to choose, again, you know, this is, I'm not upset, this is not the reason, to own the cause, back, you know, take it back to the mind and say, this is a part of me became afraid again, and I chose the, you know, I went running to my friend the ego, and it's this is hurting me. I don't want this, and, you know, please help me to see this differently. I could see peace with you, and then wait. It's just, you know, it's the same practice in any given moment. So we're always looking at, we've gone into our grab bag of guilt. If we're reacting in any way, and the reaction in itself is not sinful, it's nothing, as this says. But you know, our belief in it, we have a choice whether to make that real and proceed with it, to go plunging back into the dream and trying to avenge the way we're feeling, or defend it, or you know, we have a choice to go back to our mind and say, I don't want this anymore. This is gonna, you know, I've been there before, and this is not gonna end well. I don't want it. I want to heal. You know.
Might as well grab a feather instead and be tickled.
Grab a feather. Yeah, I could see peace. I could go back to smiling, and I will. You know, I will go back to smiling when my fear subsides. You know, I can't go. You have then the patience comes in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I hate the patience part personally, but.
I want patience and I want it now.
Yeah. The purpose P I can take, but the patience P is not really. Practice P I'm okay with, but patience, just not so much. But.
Well, speaking of temporal, should we just breeze through the last 2 or 3 paragraphs? And...
Sure, we can do that, and we'll finish up. Okay.
Yeah. Why not?
Yep.
Just so people will feel complete, and in case they're being impatient with
our
meanderings with.
Okay.
I think we've covered a lot of good ground.
It's your turn.
Okay.
Paragraph 12.
All things are valuable or valueless, worthy or not of being sought at all, entirely desirable or not worth the slightest effort to obtain. Choosing is easy just because of this. Complexity is nothing but a screen of smoke which hides the very simple fact that no decision can be difficult. Well, of course, he's talking from the perspective of
above the battleground.
Above the battleground, complete inclusion and pure non-duality. But we all. What's that?
All problems have the same solution, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
But fortunately, we all have access to that.
We do.
Not within the identity that we think of ourselves, but from outside the dream of space-time, exactly. And individuality and guilt. So what is the gain to you in learning this? It is far more than merely letting you make the choices easily and without pain.
Okay. Heaven itself is reached with empty hands and open minds, which come with nothing to find everything and claim it as their own. I love that. That's sort of like that come with open, you know, the lesson 189. I feel the love of God within me now. To forget this course, forget this book, and come with open arms unto your God. Something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but.
I think it actually starts with forget this world. And I always kind of like to remember that that's the first thing to forget.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Forget this world, forget this
Because if you don't forget the world first, then
yeah, don't forget the course.
Yeah, I like the order. Somehow I think maybe I'm making that special, but I kind of like that order.
It's true. So we will attempt to reach this state today, this open-hearted, minded, empty-handed state today, with self-deception laid aside and with an honest willingness to value but the truly valuable and the real. Our 2 extended practice periods of 15 minutes each begin with this. I will not value what is valueless, and only what has value do I seek, for only that do I desire to find.
And then
Yeah.
receive what waits for everyone who reaches, unencumbered, to the gate of heaven, which swings open as he comes. Should you begin to let yourself collect some needless burdens, or believe you see some difficult decisions facing you, be quick to answer with this simple thought: I will not value what is valueless, for what is valuable belongs to me. There we have it.
That's very inspiring. Yeah, I mean, usually we're backing up from that, I will not value what is valueless, maybe our intention as we start our day.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we are catching ourselves reacting or about to react, hopefully sometimes, not actually reacting yet. But that's our clue that we are valuing something that is valueless, and all we have to do is go back to the mind and ask for what is valuable. Go back to the teacher of the valuable instead of the valueless. Right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
wait. Patiently.
Yeah, and like I said, just not make big deals. And when we catch ourselves making a big deal, then recognize that judging ourselves and feeling guilty is just adding reinforcement to that thought
Right.
system and keeping us further entrapped. And it's silly. It's just silly.
So gentle, 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 as Ken would say.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think we've said it.
That feels complete to me. Yeah. Well,
I know.
now we just have our lab, which is
Now we gotta go do it. We could stay here a while, maybe. I don't know.
yeah the
I don't want to
actual
go back.
application.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Susan. And I've been speaking with Susan Dugan, and this is Bruce Rawles, and we've been reading from Course in Miracles Workbook Lesson 133, I Will Not Value What Is Valueless, and talking a little bit about a recent couple of experiences at Temecula, a couple of workshops I attended there, a little hour and a half sessions anyway, and how much I enjoyed that. So until next time, keep on forgiving. Thanks all.